Hello, everyone. Welcome back again to the Transform Your Birth podcast. With me today is lovely Corinna, and she's just had her fourth baby. And as you all probably know, I love getting women who've had a lot of babies on the podcast because every birth kind of sets you up for the second, the next one, and the next one, which is why it's really worth putting preparation and time and effort into really doing what you can to move the needle in birth, because it's not just potentially going to affect this birth, it could affect future births. So, welcome, Corinna. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Now, Corinna, you were pregnant with your first, and you said to me prior you didn't know a lot about birth. Just tell me how you were feeling and what sort of preparation you did for number one.
Oh, look, really, I was 23 and I just thought, like whatever you do, you get a baby out of it. And I didn't see that birth is more than just physically birthing. I didn't see the mental side, the spiritual side on it. And I just went with the flow, trusted my caregivers, didn't have a birth plan, and was like, yep, I'll have a baby at the end of this.
Yeah. And the outcome?
Well, I wanted a natural birth and I was very, very disappointed because my baby was breech. I was told basically I have to have a cesarean because where I was, they don't do vaginal births. And yeah, it was breech and I was for breech. And I was just very, very disappointed. And yeah, it sort of, I think it sticks to me until this day that I didn't
Mm,
have a vaginal birth with my baby, and I think I could have done it, but I
yeah.
wasn't informed. Um, and yeah,
Around options and things.
that's right.
It's one of those situations for those listening, breech babies are babies who are upside down. So instead of a head presenting, either a bottom and sometimes even feet can be down near the doorway, the cervix, which is the door that the baby comes through. And so one of the things around breech births nowadays, since 1998, I think it was, the big breech trial came out, which was a study that basically said to medical caregivers that the safest way for babies to be born who are breech is via cesarean. And it was quite, well, apart from being a highly flawed study, it should never have become practice as quickly as what it did. But what it did, I think, is change the way a lot of twins were born, because often the second baby is breech, and increase the cesarean rates to the point where caregivers lost their skill. So I had my two vaginal breaches in 96 and 98, and the caregivers I had just saw breech as another version of normal, that the bottom would pave the way like the head would, and there was certain maneuvers they could do to make sure the head didn't get stuck. But now that we've lost our skills with working with breech, there, you know, that wisdom has gone by the wayside, and most caregivers don't feel confident in delivering breech babies. Although there are still some doctors who are either reclaiming those skills or who still have those skills who might be open to it. So it's always worth asking the question. But if you're not surrounded by people who are confident, that's going to influence your decision when it comes to either giving it a go or not. And there's different types of breech presentations, so they have to have a look at that. So there was a part of you, though, at the tender age of 23, who kind of thought, you know what, I reckon I could have done that. I think that's really interesting. So for baby number two, how did you approach that?
Well, I was quite nervous that I have to have a cesarean again because I've got a toddler running around. I've got a husband who was casually employed and didn't have leave, didn't have sick leave. I've got no family here, and I'm like, wow, if I have to have
Wow.
another cesarean, how will I manage? And even financially, how will we manage? So it was quite important to me. That I try.
Yeah.
Um, and a friend of mine was like, "Have you heard about like she's Swedish, and she's like, have you heard about hypnobirthing? What is calm birthing here?"
Mm.
And she told me about it, and I actually think it helped me so much. But I still sort of panicked because I went straight into labor. I didn't have any pre-labor, I didn't have any signs. I basically woke up, I was on my knees, and I'm like, oh my God, you get told that you labor for hours and hours or days. And I'm like, I can't do this. I cannot do this for
Mm.
days. And within 5 hours, he was born.
Wow.
And it was fine. It was beautiful. There were a few things. Like I said, I panicked. I shouldn't have panicked. I should have had the calm, and I lost that. Just because other people, yeah, got me into a wrong mindset, maybe. And my midwife, I always had for all four births, I had the same midwife, and it was lovely. But she wasn't there, and I got into hospital, and there was one midwife, and she just wanted to examine me, and I said I don't want to, and I asked her like 3 times not to do it, and she just kept going until I tried to bite her, and then she backed off. But
Whoa.
it has to come to like that extreme that I don't know.
Wow.
I wasn't calm. I didn't want it to be touched. I sort of trusted my body, but when she was like, "No, I have to check, I have to check," I sort of
Mm.
also lost faith in that.
Yeah.
Um, and I did this with my new partner. You did a meeting, a Zoom meeting a little while ago, maybe half a year ago, with
Mm.
which highlighted the importance of your partner during birth.
Yeah.
And I also didn't know that the partner during birth is so important. And I feel like my ex-husband should have stepped in and be like, no, don't touch her. He was my advocate.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen. So that's sort of what I learned out of birth number two. And then I was like, the third one will be better.
Mm. Mm. Interesting. That was unfortunate, Corinna. You got someone who wasn't prepared to listen and was following the script. And I think your comment about having somebody to speak up for you in that space is very important because as women in labour, we are highly, highly vulnerable. And it is important that we get partners on board and help them to understand that one of their key role is to be your voice when you can't, to be your advocate. Um, and as part of that is pulling together a very clear birth map or birth preferences sheet, however you want to describe it. I think birth mapping is a really good concept because it helps the people around you to understand who you are and what's important to you. What people need to realize is vaginal examinations are not a medical necessity. You can go through a whole labour and not have one. But one of the good questions to ask your carers prior to the birth is under what conditions would you want to do a vaginal examination? So that on the day you're much clearer about when you can say no. Well, you can always say no regardless, but because it is your body, it's your birth, it's your baby. However, if you've had discussion prior to the Labor Day, you can get a bit of a sense as to why they think the way they do and what it is that they're actually looking for. But Corinna, in that situation, had full right to say no. It is always a choice, and informed consent is required through the birth process. So that must have got you goat up a little bit, Corinna. I bet you went into baby number three with a fair bit of determination, did you?
Absolutely. I sort of did a quick refresher with the Calm Birth book, but didn't really, not disregarded it, but didn't pay as much attention to the calm birthing book and
Mhm.
methods, um, which I now regret. And I'm like, yep, this birth will be beautiful. It will be perfect. I don't want any interventions. I don't, another thing which I didn't want is a cannula in my arm. You can't find the veins. And if you go into a hospital, you're in labor and then they're trying to stick something into you and your veins don't cooperate, it would be, quite horrible. But then with my third, my water broke in the middle of the night, and I waited until the morning and went into hospital. And when your water breaks, they give you like a time frame, and your baby has to be there within, I think 24 hours, or they basically tell you that you'll get an infection and you might kill your baby, which is horrible. But with me, it was also not fantastic because I had a previous cesarean. So they said, okay, so you have to have your baby within 24 hours. Um, but the issue we now have is tomorrow we can't induce you because there is a different doctor basically available, and he doesn't induce people who had a previous C-section. And today there's someone there basically who's happy to do that. But we only have one spot left. You have to make your decision now if you want to be induced or not, or if you want to wait. But if you don't go into labor naturally, you will have a cesarean. And if you don't have a cesarean, you will kill your baby. And I was like, oh, wow. And it was a lot of pressure, and you couldn't really think. So I chose the induction. Um, Look, at the end of the day, it was fine. And she was born within 45 minutes. I labored in the shower. I hopped in on the bed because my body told me, like it's time. And my midwife was like, no. And then she looked at me. She's like, yep, you go. And two pushes, and my daughter was born. So it sort of went well, but it also shouldn't have happened. It was a very intense labor, and it's not what I wanted. And now looking back, I now know that I had the complete right to say, no, I don't want an induction. No, I don't want a C-section tomorrow. What other options are there? And I just didn't ask. I was just told this or this or this. And that's it. And it was quite horrible because I was so vulnerable.
Wow. You know, that's a really interesting story you've just told, because what it highlights is how different carers have different beliefs and approaches in terms of the way that they manage pregnancy and birth. And in Corinna's case, she had a midwife saying, "Oh, you've got a doctor who won't induce and will go to Caesar, and a doctor who will induce, and and these different opinions." Always getting a second opinion is a really wise thing to do when it comes to making decisions as significant as whether to induce or have a cesarean or wait longer. Now, typically, when waters break, they usually give you 24 hours for labour to begin, not for the baby to be born, but for labour to begin. And then after that, there's going to be pressure to induce. However, I've known women who've said no to induction and have given it longer. If you are managing potential infection, the best place to be is at home. That's where you're the safest from infection. Don't go into swimming pools, don't have sex, just keep things nice and clean. And there's no, this 24-hour period is a period that is chosen as being a safe period of time to give that woman that time to go into labor. But it doesn't always happen in that 24 hours. If you feel confident, you could potentially ask for longer. And keep an eye on your temperature to make sure that there is no sign of infection. So it gets very tricky when you've got different people with different belief systems, all professionals, all knowing things you don't, opinions that you need to respect and take into account when it comes to making decisions, but also use your own common sense and feel into what feels right. Because in Corinna's story there, she was told quite clearly that, oh, this doctor will say yes and this doctor will say no. What that tells you is that it's very arbitrary. And the goal of this is to make a good decision for your set of circumstances, not just rely on, well, I do this after 24 hours. Well, what's the signs of infection? Ask that question. How can I monitor that to make sure that I'm not getting an infection? How can I support this baby to come along in that 24 hours? and asking questions like that to help you to really start to work with it. Because as Corinna just shared, the decision between an induction, a cesarean, these are very significant decisions. Um, but yeah, it can be very interesting to see how different people have different ideas about the best way to go forward. Yeah. So, Corinna, you had very, very quick births. How, as we look at baby 2 and 3, what sort of tools from the calm birth did you use that really supported you to be able to manage it? I know you said you panicked in the first, and I suspect a lot of that, sorry, in the second birth, I suspect a lot of that was because of the environment. Midwives wanting to do vaginals, stimulating you, not necessarily being able to go into labor land. What's your feeling about those two labors?
Oh, I maybe should have practiced the breathing a bit more. Maybe
Mhm.
I know at the calm birth, especially the book, there's like the birthing stories, and they do help to a certain extent, but I actually think you need a little bit more information and just more of it and know that everything is normal. But like I said, I panicked with the my boy, my second birth, because I thought this is going on forever.
Yeah.
And I should have just, like the breathing with my fourth baby, the calm breathing. Um, it was probably the number one tool, and that just to know that everything is normal and that my body, just the stages, what it's going through right now. Um, j just the knowledge. I think
Mm.
that just helps the most.
I think you've picked up there that when you've got ideas in labor about where you're up to, and the
Yeah.
idea that this is going to go on for days because it's my first vaginal birth, and you know, and if it's like this for hours upon hours, I'm never going to get through it. When what your body was showing you is that you were having a very efficient labor, big, strong
Mm,
contractions very close together right from the beginning, shows efficiency. Because remember, those contractions are created through the pressure of the baby's head on the cervix, and that is what releases the oxytocin levels. More pressure, more oxytocin, more intense the labor, the quicker the labor. But the idea that you had hours and hours to go was probably what tripped you up, because the power of the mind is immense in labor. And women labor very well when they're in this contraction right here, right now. They're not thinking ahead. They're not thinking how long they've been in labor for. They're just in the moment. And sometimes as women in labor, we need people to remind us of that in labor, Corinna, because you're in an altered state when you're in labor. You can't think in the same way. So, a little bit of coaching and reassurance would have gone a long way to supporting you to surrender in that space. So, I wouldn't be blaming yourself around that. I think it's, we need to be surrounded by wise people who are very, very aware of the journey, that each birth is just so very different and can read those signs and encourage you in that moment. Mm. But the breathing is powerful. So, baby number 4. Tell us about that, because things started to really move into um, being the way you wanted it to unfold. Tell us.
absolutely. It was the perfect birth, and we had a very rough pregnancy with she was IVF and I had ovarian hyperstimulation. I was very sick. I had an ovary turn on me. And I was like, wow, this has been so tough. I really need like a redeeming birth. And actually listened to the Calm Birth audiobook because, you're quite busy with that many kids. And I'm like, yeah,
Mm.
the audiobook, that will do it. And just to refresh, because I've got a 5-year gap between, number 3 and number 4. And I listened to the book and I was like, yeah, that's right. And I just, always remember that I have to trust my body and my body is creating those waves and it can't create anything what I can't handle and I'll be all right. And she was born on a Tuesday, and I had a midwife appointment, and she came to me around midday, and I'm like, oh, how's it looking? And she's like, oh, look, I reckon you'll go over again. The other two were born at 41 weeks. I was 39 plus 4. And she's like, no, you'll go over again. I don't see, like, but also it can change very quickly.
Mm.
And then in the evening, I went to bed and I was a bit like, oh, I feel a little bit different, but ended up turning the light off. And just as I turned the light off, my water broke. My waters broke in in bed. And I told my husband, quick, get a towel or something. He had no idea what was happening.
Yeah.
And we ended up putting quickly, all the sheets in the washing machine on a 1 hour cycle. And um, I started having contractions pretty quickly. And because my last daughter, she was um, she was born within 45 minutes,
Yeah.
um, we did sort of prepare because we don't have family here. It will take time for the midwife to come to hospital. It will take time for people to come here to look after the other kids. So we knew that there was a possibility that it's quite quick and that she may be born at home.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I started having contractions and they were quite close together and we didn't time. And I just, asked my husband, like, how are they apart? Because they're um, quite strong and quite quick. And we started timing them. I think it was 22:42. And then I had another one a couple of minutes later. And then at 22:46, I called my friend and I was like, you got to come. I'm having the baby. And she's like, when do you want me? And I'm like, oh, now. And she took her 10 minutes to get to my house. But the whole time, I did the breathing and I felt like breathing out and I took like longer breaths out. It wasn't as painful as breathing in, and I knew I could do it. I was upright, and I bought a few things. I had a TENS machine, I had a burp sling, I had all sorts of stuff, a hot water bottle we prepared, and I didn't need it. I was in control of my body. I trusted my body. I could handle the pain. It was, I was fine. I had so much faith. Um, and I just remember that every little wave brought me closer to my baby. And yeah, my friend got here at 22:55, and I was just so relieved and so happy. And the next contraction, things shifted from, dilating to pushing, but and it was amazing. I was so happy, and I just looked at it, and I'm like, now we're doing it. And I grabbed the towel. We were in the bedroom. I grabbed the towel which I had there. She grabbed a few more towels. My husband, he got some hot water and a pad to protect my perineum, which was very important to me. I told him how to do that.
Yeah.
And we grabbed the pillow. I now have new pillows. And I kneed down like on the pillow, supported myself on the bed somehow, and I didn't have to push. She just came out. There was another contraction. The head came out, and then a little bit of a break. And with the next contraction, the rest of the baby was born, and it was absolutely beautiful, and it was absolutely perfect.
Wow.
Um, and my daughter woke up from that. She joined us, and it was quite special. I
Wow.
loved it. It was perfect.
So was the midwife, did she come there at all, or how did you?
To the hospital. So she's not allowed to do stuff at home. And I joked to her about it. I said, oh, I'll just call you after the baby is born, and I'll meet you at the hospital. And then I called her and I'm like, so, when do you want to meet me? And she's like, no, you didn't have the baby, did you? And I'm like, yeah, you would have never, like, she would have never made it to hospital. If we would have left, we would have had the baby just down the road. We
Wow.
didn't have time to, but it was perfect. I was in control. I trusted my body. It knew what to do.
Mm.
And I was calm and relaxed and full
Wow.
of love the whole time.
Wow. Full of love. There's that oxytocin. Wow. That's really interesting. So after the baby was born, did you birth the placenta at home or did you go into the hospital?
Yep, at home, we sort of like everything went quite well, so we just stayed at home for a fair bit, and I had my baby cuddles, the first breastfeed. I didn't want it to rush, and everything seemed, fine. And also the hospital is only 5 minutes down the road, so I was like,
Mm.
oh, but I'm not sure what you're supposed to do. Maybe I should have gone right away, but that would have then ruined the bonding time
Yeah.
with the baby.
Yeah.
So we decided to do that a little bit later.
One of the most powerful things you can do when a baby is born is not to disturb the mother after the birth, because one of the most important parts of the birth is yet to come, and that's the birth of the placenta. And the best way for the safe delivery of a placenta is lots of oxytocin, because lots of oxytocin is what retracts and shrinks the uterus, helping the placenta to be released and then sealing up those blood vessels. And when we disturb a mother after birth, we're actually putting the placental part of the birth at risk. We want maximum amounts of oxytocin for the safety of that to happen. So that was actually really wise to really protect that time after she was born. And I suspect supported the safety of the delivery of your placenta. So did you end up going to the hospital at all, Corinna?
Yeah, I do have to admit. So she was born just before midnight, and then we're like, oh, look, it's in the middle of the night. We're pretty tired. Maybe we should sleep first. So we slept, and then, the other kids got up in the morning, so they all had the cuddles, well, we're like, okay, so we got to bring them to school now, and it was a bit late because we had, cuddles and prioritize that. So we brought him to school, and we had to check him in at the office, and the kids were like, oh, can we show our classrooms? And I'm like, sure, let's go. So we went to three different classrooms, had a chat to the principal, to support teachers, to office ladies, and
And then went to the hospital.
then we got a coffee, and then we
Oh, you
went to
got a
hospital.
coffee and then to the hospital. Obviously, you weren't feeling the need to see it as an emergency. A lot of people would be rushing off to hospital, but I think that's
Yes,
quite
but
funny.
I think we got to stop looking at birth as being so medical,
Yeah.
because it is really, like all we see with birthing is you have to go to hospital, you lie on your back, you push that baby out, everything will go wrong. There's a lot of lights, a lot of doctors, but it doesn't have to be that way. And it's very natural, and it should be beautiful. And I believe that, um, like I said, my eldest daughter, she woke up, she didn't come into the room during the birth, she didn't want it to. I would have had her there. It would have been fine for me, but she didn't want it to. That's okay.
Yeah, her
But she
choice.
was there afterwards. She wanted to come in. She was polite. She just wanted to be part of it. And I believe that I gave her
Wow.
the first beautiful birth experience
Mm,
she would have had. And that birth can be that way. It doesn't have to be in a sterile environment that, it will not be dramatic. It will not be, things don't go wrong. We're
mm,
designed to do this. We have to believe that we can do this. And I had the most beautiful experience. And so did she. She was one of the first people who got to hold her little sister, and
yeah.
she sniffed her little head, and she did everything what a grown woman would do. She hugged it really tight to her body, and just sniffed her head, and it was so special.
Wow. There's that primal instinct playing out of holding a little one and wanting to protect her sister.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. You've had a really interesting sort of journey into birth, and it sounds like, Corinna, each birth brought in a level of determination and ownership, a greater level of ownership and responsibility for your part of trusting your body, learning to work with your body, using your breath, maxing out those oxytocin levels, which supports the process, and trusting yourself to birth without having any inclination of going to the hospital um, until after you'd visited the school and, shared the joy with other children and had a coffee and then off to hospital. Hilarious. So I love how you've normalized birth beautifully with your stories. Corinna, what did you learn about yourself through that process, through the whole fall?
Oh, look, it took me like 11 years, but I'm now more confident. I know that, we were designed to do that. I know that I'm very glad I had medical professionals there, but
Mhm.
I also know that they may make it worse. And I feel like things were done to my body because it was someone's opinion that this is right. And it's it's not right for me.
Mm. You could see that in hindsight, how things could have been potentially different. But that's how you learn, isn't it? You've got to experience things sometimes. What advice would you give to a pregnant woman?
Well, basically just to stay calm. Everything is normal. Like everybody does things differently in a different time at a different speed. But it can all potentially be normal. And if a medical professional says something, look at alternatives
Mm,
because it's your body, it's your choice, and you can say no.
beautiful. There's a great set of questions that I give my families when it comes to really being able to identify the difference between a medical necessity and a choice. And the first three are this: what are the risks? What are the benefits? Are there any alternatives? That alternatives question is a powerful one because often there are. And I think when we start to really look into why are we doing this, what's the purpose of this intervention, this level of help or support, is it the best thing? Could we try something else first? Could we wait a little bit longer to just see how things unfold? All of that approach, I think, tends to lead to better decision making. And we don't interfere so much with birth because once you start to interfere with it, then you often need to compensate for that. And intervention can lead to intervention. But having said that, though, sometimes we need help and we need to be open to being okay around that as well. So Corinna has shared some incredible wisdom with us this week. A woman of four babies is always worth listening to when it comes to childbirth because each birth can teach us so much and often leads to the next. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll be with you again next time. Bye for now.